First game post NBA trade deadline, 32 to go for the Philadelphia 76ers to make a push, whatever that push is. Whatever Daryl Morey was talking about, we'll talk about.
We didn't say it was a good one.
Some direction they're going in. They're pushing somewhere, and we'll see where it is exactly. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers Pregame Show, presented by Bet365. Download Bet365 app using code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Look at this, folks. Back in the studio for a pregame with Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck. I'm Devon Givens. Bree with us as always. And of course, all of you in the chat. We thank you for joining us here on a Friday for some Friday night hoops as we get the weekend started with some local sports, of course, with the big game, as we know, on Sunday. But a big one here tonight, Kyle, as we start things off where we thought that they were going to be at full strength, which is why our thumbnail said full strength. Wrong, but they are getting close. And with the full strength was Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey in the lineup together for just the 11th time this season out of the possible 50 games that they have played so far for this campaign. So it was a big deal until Gershon Yabusele is now going to be out this particular game.
It's still a big deal. Look, it's just that when Yabu is referred to as one of their 5 best players, which I think we all agree he is, by Nick Nurse, and says starting him because we need to have him out there and see what that looks like and yada, yada, yada. It is a shame that he now misses this game as Andre Drummond returns and presumably takes those backup center minutes as well. But the most important thing, the 3 stars are available, right? We've seen so few of those games total. So even smaller number of games where all 3 have finished. And as we were discussing before the show, knock on some wood, certainly not a guarantee that they're going to all make it through this one. Ring some bells, whatever you got to do. But the hope is finally on February 7th, preseason is finally over. This to borrow a Sixers catchphrase or a marketing slogan of the past, this starts now.
This starts now. 32 games left. And Aaron in the chat says the thumbnail jinx for the game. Well, it was before the game, too, before they announced it. But first, before we get to the lineup and the starters, which we do have for everybody, let's talk about Daryl Morey post-trade deadline and discussing all the moves that he made. Of course, Caleb Martin out, Quentin Grimes in, Reggie Jackson also gone, Jared Butler in, bringing in Chima Okeke. How do you say his name?
Chuma
Okeke.
You had all the letters right. You just reversed some of them.
Chuma Okeke in as well. And but today,
I'll double check on that.
Thank you.
When you said that, though, you said it so convincingly. I thought you were right. I'm like, have I been saying it wrong this whole time?
It's a good player at Auburn. Let's see what he does here in the 10-day contract. What did Daryl Morey? What stood out to you in what Daryl Morey had to say today with his post-trade deadline press conference?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he talked up Grimes and that acquisition and his ability to shoot and spread the floor and then defend the ball on the other side. And I think that's mostly true. Talked up Butler a little less, but still an intriguing young guard that they got. So I think that's probably the starting point. In terms of Embiid, he spent a considerable amount of time talking about Embiid and the nature of the injury and managing the swelling and the pain and how there's still some hope, even a little bit of belief that in the future the symptoms will be less frequent, even possibly down to 0. So we spent a decent time talking about that. He sort of went back and expressed his continued belief in the big 3, bringing up, like you mentioned, they've only played 11 games together, only finished 9 of them or whatever that number is, and they have like an 8-1 record. And he still believes, he basically went into a long thing about how he believes in his group and their ability to find role players like Yabusele, who we're now talking about, can they clear money to sign? It's the 3 stars that matter. He still believes in his 3 stars. And he pretty much admitted that, the buyout wasn't the driving force. The buyout flexibility wasn't the driving force behind the KJ move, which then sort of tacitly implies that the luxury tax was, even though he didn't say it. There's only 2 benefits.
Hang the banner, baby. Duck the tax.
If buyout flexibility is not the reason, then the luxury tax is. Those are sort of like the bullet points I would start off with. Certainly, the injury reporting and Embiid's injury going forward is the biggest of those because Embiid, quite frankly, just matters more than everything else that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I do think a lot of the Embiid stuff was recycling things that either they've said in private or we've reported on, or they've said even publicly at times, which is they feel comfortable with what they've seen on the medical front. It's why they gave him the extension in the fall, and they feel like to some degree they've dealt with some bad luck between October and now. Whether that's actually the case, I suppose we're going to find out over time.
I think the phrase he used was the Mike Tyson one, where everyone has a plan until you punch in the mouth. And he's like, man, we've been punched a lot with these injuries.
They certainly have been punched quite a bit this year. I feel like they're dodging some of them and we're getting punched with some of the way this season has played out. I will say I was not all that satisfied with some of the answers we got today. I thought specifically I wanted to get some sort of answer, not that they were going to actually give one, on the subject I talked about during our deadline show, which is the disconnect between what they're telling us and so what they're telling the fans and the product that's being put on the floor, where guys like Caleb and Lowry and Drummond and PG and Joel, like that's basically a third of your roster. They'll say, day to day, we're hoping this guy will play, and then weeks go by and there's no real explanation for no one playing. So I wasn't satisfied with that. I understand the answer he gave regarding we want to get younger and more athletic and more dynamic. Well, you also were the person who assembled the older and less dynamic and less athletic team in the summer. So I don't think we got a good explanation on that, because frankly, you didn't even get to see if what you said was the reason we can't win games with PG and Maxey, which I asked directly about, was guys aren't healthy. Well, how do you know you need to get younger and more dynamic if these guys have not been able to take the floor and show they're good enough and productive enough to be the high-level team that you estimated that they were in the offseason? So, the Joel stuff is very important, and it's all well and good. They're clearly going to stand behind their franchise player. If they had done something different today, if Daryl had come out and been like, boy, really regretting that extension, that would have been some major, major, major news. So wasn't expecting anything of that sort. But yeah, I think part of the reason that I'm just dissatisfied with not just the answers today, but the answers all season is that the product hasn't been good enough.
Yeah.
And there's just no real way to get past that until this team gets out on the floor and Joel and Paul and Tyrese get some time together. All the answers mean little to nothing to me.
So with him saying, look, Joel is the core to everything, and one of the things that really got under your skin at the beginning of the season was the messaging of him going forward. The shedding of the light of how they're going to go about these final 32 games, what were you able to take away from any of that, of how they're going to approach things here? They still have back-to-backs. We assume that he's not going to play in those back-to-backs like we didn't see this Tuesday and Wednesday. He played Tuesday, did not play on Wednesday.
Yeah.
What are you expecting going forward here?
Oh, again, there's a disconnect in the messaging on that front too, right? Because to your point, Devon, you're absolutely right. They've said with Joel, we're going to be responsible. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Nick Nurse said within the last month, when Joel was still out and we're asking about, hey, have things changed? Nick said, yeah, I'm in a position, and what I think and what I've heard from the medical people is everybody is going to be able to play or have to play as much as possible. So I guess they're meeting reality in that way, right? Like they don't really have a choice. When what's the record right now? 20 and 30?
Yes.
So you're 10 games under 500. You're still sitting like right outside the play-in tournament. And I know that being in the play-in tournament is the bare minimum you need to do to just stay alive. I don't think you should want to rely on that to get into the postseason, right?
Especially where you were supposed to be at the beginning of the season.
Yes, they got to go on a serious run here. So I think it should be on the table that Joel would play back-to-backs, and that, frankly, that Paul would as well, because that has been far from a guarantee for him this season. He's missed a lot of the second halves of back-to-backs. But I don't think we have – I don't think you can know, because the thing that he really underlined today with Joel is that it is such a fluid, symptom-based response that they're on, right? Like they could say, hey, going into this week, if we have 4 games, we want him to play in all 4, right? And including a back-to-back, including a 3 games and 4 nights. But if he plays a game and he wakes up the next day and it's knee swole up again, well, then it's not just he might miss this game. He can miss a week. And that's kind of the whole trick of trying to build around this guy right now and trying to predict out the rest of the season.
But Derek, he also said in that their goal is to fight for the playoffs, as Kyle was talking about that. The best way to do that. And mind you, folks, as we sit here right now before the games tip off tonight, we keep saying only because it's the Eastern Conference. So let's just make sure we square that away right now. They're only 4 games back of the Detroit Pistons right now. And that's not nothing for what they're saying for these 32 games that they have remaining, believing that they can somehow get some things done and push for the playoffs in these final 32 games. They get an All-Star break to rest their players. None of them are playing in the All-Star game. So even with Paul George's finger, that is a problem right now. They are currently sitting behind the Pistons. Again, 4.5 games. They are in the 7th spot. Detroit is. But that's how crucial we were complaining about the thing with Miami on Wednesday. Hey, man, you're only 5 games back of this team. You can't lose to a team like that. That's right there in front of you. That's not playing all that good at basketball. But they want to make the playoffs. That's their goal. How are you going to do that? And we've seen what this team plays like when he's out. Paul George misses time, and Tyrese Maxey is left to lift all the weight for this basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, if you want the answer, they're going to make the playoffs because the bottom half of the East stinks.
There you go.
They'll make the play in.
Play in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like it's going to be a great accomplishment if they get the 9 or the 10 seed. It's just, like Kyle said, the bare minimum you have to do. And hopefully at that point, look, they've got, 30 games left. If Joe
32.
plays, yeah, you're right. I can't math. It's been a long week.
No. Damn it, you're supposed to be the calculator over there.
It's been a long week. If they even win, let's say Joe plays 18 of them, first of all, I'd consider that a win, a pretty big win, and they will walk into one of those 2 playoff or play-in spots. They are, what are they behind the 8 seed? They're 3.5 games behind the 8 seed or 2.5 games behind the 8 seed.
And that's Orlando. You kind of expect them to get things together.
You expect Orlando to bounce back a little bit. So I think that would be a little bit tough. Certainly getting up to 6 in Miami, even though Miami obviously just made a massive, massive trade, getting up to that would be pretty tough as well. So I don't even necessarily think they have to go on a run here. They will back into the play-in spot. And truthfully, if your big 3 are actually back and playing relatively frequently, and Paul George has the pinky brace off, and Joel Embiid isn't getting regular flare-ups of the knee, they could be interesting. But nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody right now in their right mind thinks, well, even if they make the play-in and they win the play-in and they compete well in the first round, they can keep that going for 6 to 8 week playoff run. It's just not feasible right now.
The funniest possible outcome, and by funniest, I mean the most miserable possible outcome, is they're in the 9-10 play-in. Joel can't play in it, and Trae Young puts up 35 and 15 in the play-in, and they are eliminated.
Paul George
in one
goes
game.
2 for 11, and
that's you can almost see it coming.
That would be so funny. I
However,
would just laugh
for
the entire time.
For the time being, I do want to try to preserve some semblance of optimism.
We saw Miami going to run as an 8 seed. Come on, man.
Crazier things have happened.
You tell me health, I'll believe really crazy stuff. It's just
fantastic too. They did
again,
that for us.
Tonight is when I feel like so many of these games, we have to convince ourselves that something that we're watching is oh, this is meaningful, right? It's Yabu at the 5. What are you seeing there? We've spent a lot of time this season analyzing someone like Yabu because he's been, frankly, one of the only guys who's an interesting current and forward-looking piece. Well, now there are a few more of those guys to add to the mix around the core. And what do we see from the PG Joel minutes? Because presumably Maxey will continue to kind of lead stuff on his own, lead some backup units. And so PG and Joel will spend some more time together. What does that combination look like? Have they been able to do anything in the gym, in the practice facility, just while both of those guys are out for various periods of time to accelerate where those 2 are at? And Justin Edwards, this would be one of his first real opportunities to play with more of the full strength. Actually, it is the first opportunity he's had to play with the full strength team, right? He got to play with Joel the other night, but PG's not in that lineup. And so how does a guy who is that type of quick release, quick trigger shooter on the perimeter, and a nice tenacious defender. We've liked what we've seen from him there, even though he makes the typical rookie mistakes. It'll be a great proving ground for him on top of, what do we see out of the top guy. So I feel good as someone who has to watch and cover this team for a living. It's like, man, these are real reps. These are meaningful minutes. It's against a team that is a decent, right now, firmly in the playoff hunt type of team in the East. So I am excited for this one. With all the concerns we have moving forward and all that those are important to think about. But I'm glad we get to watch what should be, knock on wood, a real basketball game.
Yep, absolutely should. All right, let's shift focus to the big three here, Derek. And, game number 11, folks. Let's let you know that again. Game 11. Game 51 for this basketball team is just game 11 for your 3 stars. And the record has been good in their 10 starts together, 7-3. They finished with that record of 7-3 in those 10 games. Game number 11 here, but you also said it's 6-1 in the games that they have finished.
Yeah.
The game with Joel Embiid got ejected. He got hurt in one. And what happened was it Paul George?
Hit in the face. I think Joel got hit in the face in one of them.
Yeah. And then
the Indiana game. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was thrown out of the other one.
Yeah.
So there's that. Fun season, everybody. Fun season. 32 games remaining. So with this one, though, again, if you are looking for any kind of silver lining that, hey, they do have a decent record in the short amount of time that we've seen them. Can they get some things? And we've talked so much about the chemistry and the camaraderie out there on the floor of how they play off of one another. And Cade Cunningham is now listed as out tonight. We mentioned it, all of us, before the show.
Boy, ESPN this is probably thrilled about this match.
This is, again, one of those winnable games for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Oh, it absolutely is. And look, the big three brought up the record 6-1 when they finish games. They have a positive scoring differential when those 3 are on the court, based off of a very bad offense and an incredible defense. This is, I think, if you're looking for what to watch, it's hard to really say because Paul George looked so tentative and so barely on the floor offensively in the last game. You don't know what version of Paul you're getting for this one. This is certainly, the only thing he looked comfortable doing against Miami was shooting threes, which is good because that's mostly going to be his role in offense when he's on the floor with Embiid and Maxey. But you're obviously, at least based on how he looked the other night, talking about a relatively compromised Paul George. So, in terms of what we can expect, I don't think anyone else can really sit here and know. Like, Joel can walk out and after taking 3 weeks off, drop a triple-double. Paul didn't look like that at all. So like I said, I think with the role he's in, even if he's just a high-volume catch-and-shoot three-point shooter, that can add some value, which is good because right now that looks like about all he's comfortable doing offensively.
And I think the scrutiny should be even higher than it has been on what he brings defensively as well, because Maxey is in full carry the offense mode recently. We've already seen Joel drop the 29-point triple-double. We know he's going to get lots of touches, almost certainly going to produce against this Pistons team. If Paul is going to be that background guy on offense, that's okay with the other 2 guys available and likely cooking these guys. But that means on the other end of the floor, where, by the way, they have less veteran help right now because of trading Caleb Martin. You only have, I know Edwards has been a good wing defender, but he is a rookie. Like, he's going to go through ups and downs. So Oubre and Paul are like, pressure's on you because Quentin Grimes is more, and Daryl talked about it today. One of the things he said during his press conference is that they view Grimes as he's taking the top guy in the backcourt, right? That's why they like his fit next to Maxey and next to McCain, that he's going to be, hey, if you have a high-level point guard, if you have a high-level 2 guard, Grimes will be guarding that guy moving forward, and that's great. So Paul's got to be willing from this point onward to be more of the primary stopper at times rather than the help guy. And I know that the book on him, dating back to LA, a lot of Clippers people were like, don't expect him to come in here and be the number 1 option stopper. Yeah. So if he can't exert himself as much on offense with the pinky situation, I understand it, right? Be a catch and shoot guy. Don't put your finger in more jeopardy than it needs to be, because now we know that's a torn tendon, right? That's a real injury that he's got to contend with, and it's hard to dribble. But you better be locking the hell in on defense.
Yeah, and I will say, and I know defending Paul George right now is not the most popular position you can take. it's not just a pinky finger. Like a torn tendon is a legitimate injury. You can, damage it. You can set your recovery timeline back. Like if he is a little bit tentative and not himself, I understand that. I think just calling it like dismissively, like, oh, he hurt his pinky. No, it's a torn tendon. Like that's legitimate.
They should hire us as consultants when they decide what they're going to diagnose the injury as, or at least say it to the public. Like say torn tendon. When you say such and such tendon in the fifth finger, people are like, oh, he's got a pinky injury. And rightfully so. They're going to turn their noses up at it. Say the guy's got a torn tendon. That's it. Pretty simple.
No, if you're like they treat
I'm an honorary Rothman guy.
We have the Rothman guy here to help you out.
They treat injuries as like a state secret when injuries make fans feel sympathy. Like I don't.
Anyway, let's talk about Quentin Grimes.
Let's get to the debut of Quentin Grimes here tonight because we thought
that we'll also complain about for different reasons.
And with that reason, let's start it off. Bree, can you share? I know you're doing one other thing, but just to throw the starting lineup, look how quick on the feet Bree is with the starting lineup. That's why she's, the greatest. All right, so the starting lineup here tonight is Tyrese Maxey and Kelly Oubre in the backcourt, with Embiid at the 5, Paul George with Justin Edwards getting the starting spot here tonight. For Yabusele being out, he has earned that role as well, and he has thrived in that role. But we were also talking about, hey, with Yabusele out, could Quentin Grimes get that starting spot? And
the old process Sixers.
Shake right your hand,
put you right in the starting lineup.
Jump right on in there, my man. And so Quentin Grimes, though, coming off the bench in this one, and he gets to play in that backup role. He'll come off the bench with Kyle Lowry, Eric Gordon also. But this is a guy that, as you talked about, Daryl Morey was speaking highly, obviously, because he just made a big trade for him to come in and see where he fits in.
Yeah, and I think I talked about it a lot on our deadline show, and all of us, I think, have been pretty pro trading for Grimes, despite the fact that we all respect Caleb and what he brings to the team, because he's just an easy player to slot into the lineup, right? A guy who can shoot and can defend. I'd say at least 2 positions. You could talk me into 3 if it's more of a small forward, right? Like the smaller,
McCain.
So there's a big pool of players that I think he's capable of defending, and he can space the floor. He's comfortable in the catch and shoot role, comfortable taking guys off the dribble. Now, I will say, from talking to the Dallas people and having watched them myself as well, there will be some WTF moments from him where he has a little bit too high of an estimation of himself as a driver, or get himself into trouble, or take some silly shots. But, by and large, he'll be in a position where you minimize that stuff, right? You're going to have open shots for him. I would say most of the time he's on the floor because Joel's going to get doubled. If it's a Maxey-led lineup that he's out there with, that means that teams are probably walling up at the rim and they're going to get into some skip pass and swing pass type of situations. So offense should be easy for him. And I'm curious to see, we've seen a lot of these, and we have a lot of complaints about them, the mini guard lineups. But I do like the idea of if it's Maxey on the floor, you could do something like Gordon and Grimes, where you have a couple of shooters and just really spread it out. Add a wing in there. When Yabu's healthy, put him out there. And then you're talking about a true 5-out, guys all around the floor that can hurt you from deep. There's some interesting things they can do with lineups. Of course, Nick Nurse decided to say pregame something that already set me off, and was like, we think we'll probably play him a bunch with Kyle Lowry. And I just sat there and was like, well, fun's over, everybody, before it even starts.
Yeah. No, I'm excited for him, though. I'm actually excited. A guy who's just willing to shoot, willing to let it fly when he gets it, and is willing to lock in defensively. We have talked time and time again, where if you're going to play, guards next to Maxey, they need to be able to shoot, and they need to be able to defend up their position and really hound a ball handler. And I think he could really be a good fit. And look, he's still relatively young. He can be a long-term partner with them if you bring him back here in the summer. I think it's a good skill set. I am willing to live with a couple of WTF drives if you give me great. I mean, look, Kelly gives you WTF drives and no shooting, and we put up with it because he gives you great defense. If you give me shooting and that, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with this. How many minutes he plays. I'm sure they're going to keep it pretty simple for him as they get him out there on the floor. But when you play with even though he's going to be out there with Kyle Lowry. And he does have some time with some of the other three. Some of that stuff is just easy of what to do. And when you get newer guys, they typically send them into the corner anyway. Knock down your open shot that you're talking about. If the ball swings to you, though, at the top of the key, knock down that open shot, ball fake, get to the basket, finish, make the extra pass, and defend like crazy on the other end to make sure that your minutes continue to pick up under Nick Nurse's system and see where you then fit where you're supposed to be with Tyrese Maxey in that backcourt overall.
And by the way, one quick thing. Because he is in this contract year, I would assume if he's got, the right people around him, everyone's in his ear, like, do exactly what they ask, play hard, take the shots that come to you, and like buy into this role, because that could be the difference between, maybe the deal that you want and getting shortchanged a little bit in the summer. So it can work against you in the long term, but in the short term, you should get the absolute best out of Quentin Grimes.
If you get what you traded from Dallas with him, 10 points, 40% from three, and solid defense, you're going to get paid. You're going to get exactly what you're asking for from the front office to try to get paid in the offseason.
Absolutely.
Anything on Butler of what that might look like with his two-way contract and how that all fits in?
So Derek mentioned before the show, and this is an important, CBA-related thing, he might not play until they get some roster stuff figured out, if you want to enlighten the people on that.
Then again, I couldn't do 80 minus 50 is 32, so I don't know if I'm on top of my game here tonight, but I'll give it a shot.
I'm calculating it for you, man.
So basically, there are some really weird rules with two ways. First of all, like a single two-way player can only be active for 50 days up in the NBA. That's one. Neither Edwards or Butler they're getting close to that limit, but they're not at that limit. The bigger limit is when you have fewer than 15 players on your roster, 15 NBA contracts on your roster. Anytime a two-way player is on your active roster, that counts towards a 90-game limit. The Sixers right now are in the upper 80s. I'm pretty sure it's at 88. I have to confirm that, but they are getting real close to that 90-game limit, and they only have right now 13 players on the roster. So until they either sign more players or convert Edwards or Butler to standard NBA contracts, they pretty much only have, I think, 2 more games between the two of them that they can play.
And Edwards is playing tonight. Yeah. So that, in theory, if they're at 89 after tonight, now, that's not good.
I was asking around, the sense I get, and this could obviously change, is that the negotiations aren't imminent. Like, they aren't imminently going to convert. They might. Like, the negotiations could start up, and I'm sure they're going to look to keep both of them around long term.
And some have signed today to some standard.
So I wonder if there's a two-way contract that they might get just to get up to that 15 roster limit. So then you don't have to worry about this 90-game threshold. But there are some really stupid considerations that they have to worry about. And just between
Butler and Edwards themselves, Edwards has played 21 games. Tonight will be 22 with the Sixers, where Butler has played 32 for the Washington Wizards before being traded to the Sixers.
You guys think we see Chuma Okeke tonight? I feel like probably.
Depending on bonus situation.
They've got a decent amount of players available
and
tonight.
Andre Drummond, who's going to drive you nuts. He's probably going to play. So maybe not Okeke.
What do you think the chances are they play Bona over Drummond?
0.
I won't say 0, but I think they're very slim.
I'll say 1% then.
I think Drummond is going to be the guy playing. So
I'm going to complain about that. I think you're right, but I think
we have a whole post-game show, buddy. We'll get to it then.
Hopefully Quentin Grimes drops 20 and we can focus on that.
I hope so.
Let's get to our Bet365 pregame pick segment, brought to you by Bet365, Never Ordinary. And our pregame picks tonight are this quick same game parlay. Plus 120 tonight. Tyrese Maxey over 6.5 assists with the big fella back. Got a shooter there and Quentin Grimes.
That seems like an easy one. That's easy money right there.
They put it as an over.
I know.
That's why I was like, yeah, I'm taking that one tonight. And then with Malik Beasley, who did not shoot all that well. He was 0 for 6 from 3 in their last game and they lost to Cleveland. But we know he can get hot going. And
he gets them up. He's taking over 9 threes a game this year.
So I went with 3+ with Tyrese Maxey over 6.5 assists. That's a plus 120 at Bet365 for our pregame picks. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. We're going to let you all go right now because it's a nationally televised game on the 4-Letter Network.
Get yourself a nice beverage
right away. So we want to let you get there. And to do so, we're going to get ready to sign off. For Derek, Kyle, Bree, I'm Devon. We'll be back after the game. Kyle said, get your beverage. Sit back, put your feet up. Don't yell too much if Drummond is in before Bono.
Leave that to us.
Yeah, leave that to us. We'll talk to you after the game here on the PHLY Sixers Postgame Show presented by Bet365. Enjoy.
We all silly like the mayor.